Hi everybody, I'm Missi Matthews, joined once again by Matt Williamson. Day 2 of the NFL draft. The Steelers have 2 picks today, and we know their first one in the second round. With the 52nd pick, they go with George Pickens, not to be confused with Kenny Pickett.
Right, Pickett to Pickens.
Yeah, wide receiver out of Georgia. We know the Steelers needed to add to this room after losing
Absolutely.
3 guys in free agency. So tell us, what kind of wide receiver the Steelers getting?
He's a really interesting player. He's immensely talented, and at his best, I'm not exaggerating, he may end up being the best receiver in this entire class. He's had a strange path, though. I mean, he burst on the scene as a 5-star recruit at Georgia and lit up the NCAA as a true freshman. So his breakout age is at like 18, which is amazing. And all the lists and things you read back then were, this guy's a guaranteed top 5 pick. I mean, those type of things. And some injuries got in the way and some quarterback changes, and so his path didn't go exactly as smoothly as you would have liked, and that's why he's still on the board. But he has prototypical ex-receiver traits. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he's fast, he has great body control. He came back very quickly from his latest injury to help Georgia win a national title. You got to love it.
And appropriately enough, wide receiver Chase Claypool was in Las Vegas to announce the pick, welcome him to the family. So how does he mix with the guys that we know are here right now?
I would say he's more like Claypool than anyone else on the team, as more of a bigger body, play above the rim, go up and get it type of guy, good after the catch. I don't know that he has a lot of slot versatility at this stage, so maybe they're still in the market for a slot type guy, or they flirted with Claypool there and Deontay as well, so they can, and Miller's on the roster as well, but he's more of a prototypical X.
Now, there were a ton of players still on the board that people were saying, hey, this would be a good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We knew wide receiver had to be addressed at some point. Good move to do it in this round?
I think so. I really like the group of corners that are still out there, as well as some other positions, defensive backs in general. And we saw the receiver run already, especially in the first round. You better act now or forever hold your peace, because they're going quick.
And we heard Steelers team president Art Rooney II was on Steelers Nation radio prior to the draft starting, and he said D-line, wide receiver, DB at some point have to be addressed. So we can check that one. D-line and DB certainly something else they need to go after.
Yeah, and there's a plenty, as I mentioned, there's a lot of DBs out there, especially corners. I've been targeting third-round corners for a while now. That's a real sweet spot. The defensive tackles, the run stuffers, it's not a great class for, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe they have to move around to get someone they like, or maybe that has to wait for later,
We keep talking about Matt Canada's offense and, how it will evolve, what it will look like this year. Kenny Pickett's here, Mitch Trubisky, adding somebody like Pickens. What do you see in terms of what can happen with that group?
Well, what intrigues me, first of all, I think the offense is going to change dramatically. There's a new quarterback. There's a lot of new people here. Guys like Harris and Freiermuth are in their second year. It's a young group. I mean, they played a ton of rookie snaps last year. But one thing is pretty obvious, from last year, is they basically lived in 3 receiver sets. So if you can trot out Pickens, Johnson, Claypool, Freiermuth, and Harris as your 5 skill guys, that's really formidable. Yeah.
And obviously with Najee, we saw what he was able to do. We know what they added in terms of the offensive line and free agency. Running back still a position you think that they could find in this draft a little bit later? Yes,
and I like some 5th, 6th round type of guys.
Okay.
But Najee's going to be the guy, of course, and more so than most teams. He's a true bell cow in terms of touches. That goes back to Lev Bell. I mean, that's how this team works. In that position, too, you can always find a veteran. Might not be a bad idea to bring a guy that's been around the block as kind of an older leader to the offense, too. I mean, they're very young.
All right, and if you are just joining us, the Steelers made pick number 52, taking wide receiver George Pickens out of Georgia. So quarterback, now wide receiver. We are awaiting up in the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex to hear from one of the offensive coaches, as we heard last night from Coach Tomlin and Kevin Colbert. So interested to see their perspective and, how much work they put into scouting these guys and what made him, valuable to almost a top 50 pick.
Right. I'm sure there were, because of his path being so strange to get to this point, I'm sure there's a lot of different takes on him overall, and team doctors have to be involved with this one as well. But the traits are very obvious. I mean, I don't think he's a hard guy to scout, especially if you go back several years and watch his early tape. which is what I assume they'll get. And people might remember him. I mean, he made a big play in the national championship game. He was far from 100% in that game, too. I mean, so if you just watch that tape, you'd probably be like, oh, yeah, he's a good player, but he's not special. But go watch from 2 years ago, and you'll understand, and you'll be excited.
Well, like you said, knowing that he had that injury with the ACL, coming back so quickly, wanting to be there for his team too. We saw that this past season with Juju Smith-Schuster coming back to play in the playoffs, something I don't think anybody anticipated.
Right, and Juju probably wasn't 100% either. And anyone that's been close to teams realizes this happens a lot, and it goes a long way to really gain the respect and confidence of your teammates and coaches and wanting to win. And I think he showed that.
Now,
and he helped them win.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Are you surprised there was that run of wide receivers so early last night?
A little. I really think this offseason we're going to look back in NFL history and say people are looking at wide receivers much different now.
Yeah.
And some teams are very willing to give $25 million plus to Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. Other teams, and it looks like the Steelers might be in this route, we'll just keep taking them on day 2, and they're cheaper, and go from there. So there's so many of them, but they're really in demand. And a team like the Packers or the Chiefs that have Pat Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, well, you got to cut corners somewhere to have those contracts. So they're telling those great quarterbacks, you make young receivers great. We're going to take away your best guy. That's why we're paying you the big bucks. So every team's looking at wide receiver a lot differently, and it's changing very fast.
Well, and even just the trades with wide receivers
prior
to the draft, during the draft, I just feel like
insane.
This draft has been crazy. I think we're up to 12 or 13 trades at this point.
Right.
Just through, I'm not sure what pick they're on now, but through the 50s.
We've had that many trades, and none of them are for a quarterback.
It's true.
Most of them are for wide receivers. I mean, usually if someone trades up, it's for a quarterback.
Right.
And another, as you mentioned, from pick 8 to 18, I think it was 6 or 7 wide receivers went. And with all respect to those guys, they weren't the 6 of the 18 best players. It's just a need, and everybody's playing 3 receiver sets, and you need them. And there's a lot of good ones coming in the league. That's what's different now, too, is these young kids play 7-on-7 since they're 10 years old. I mean, so they come in the league so NFL ready. There used to be this rule that third-year breakouts when wide receivers really hit their stride. Now, as the Steelers can attest, guys come to the league and they start lighting it up right away.
All right, I am told that offensive coordinator Matt Canada will be approaching the podium in just a little bit. We will take you live to the Steelers press conference room. You mentioned trading up for quarterbacks. The Steelers did not trade up. They took Kenny Pickett at number 20, and we have not seen another quarterback go so far. You're shocked, right?
I am, because I think the rest of this group can start and win games in this league. Unfortunately, I no longer have the advantage of sitting down with the young men, talking to their strength coaches, family, all those things. But just what we saw at the podium yesterday, it sounded like this organization was very impressed with several quarterbacks, and their play on the field, to me, warrants them going pretty high as well. But there's also not a ton of teams that are really in the quarterback market right now, too. Seattle comes to mind. Atlanta comes to mind. Carolina, yeah. And those teams, I don't know, not that they're going to have bad years on purpose, but they might just look to next year and build things around them. But I am shocked that more quarterbacks aren't off the board.
Why do you think it's falling that way? I feel like, maybe it was not the hottest quarterback class, but as we got closer and closer, there was so much talk, so much hype, and people were predicting maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks going in just the first round. So what do you think is the give or take here?
I don't have a great answer, because a lot of people will say, well, next year's class is going to be great.
Right.
I hear that every year. I don't buy that. I mean, at this time last year, people were talking about Sam Howell and Spencer Rattler, who's not even in this draft, as the top 2 guys in the draft. Just wait for one of them. Well, what if that was your plan? I don't understand waiting until next year. Make it happen now.
All right.
The Steelers must agree.
Okay, again, we are waiting for Steelers offensive coordinator Matt Canada. The Steelers, with their 52nd overall pick in the second round, have taken wide receiver George Pickens out of Georgia. And Matt, just to recap again, in case of anybody missed in the beginning, just what type of wide receiver he is and how he will potentially fit in here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, he's the type that if you drew him up in a lab, he'd look pretty similar. I mean, he's big, he's tall, he has great body control, good acceleration, goes up and gets the football, sharp route runner, big, strong hands. I mean, prototypical size. His usage is mostly going to be outside the numbers, but he certainly has the physicality to run in-breaking routes and make things happen after the catch. I'm curious, this is very new, it just happened. Is he the type of guy that they might give the ball to on end arounds and things like that we've seen Matt Canada do? I'm curious about that, but he's more of a prototypical receiver than you usually see coming in the league. I mean, you see a lot of slots, you see a lot of little fast guys. Well, he's kind of an old school player.
Coach Tomlin talked, in his pre-draft press conference about guys being more specific, slot, nickel. It's not just a general thing. How are you seeing that in terms of wide receivers and what they're bringing now from the college game to the pros?
Well, not to kind of avoid your question, but this receiver class in particular, if you look at the top 12 or 15 on any board, very few of them look like Pickens. There's a lot of little guys, skinnier guys, super fast guys. I mean, Drake London's a bigger dude, but there's not many, 6'3", 200-pound prototypical receiver body types. So I think that sets him apart a little bit.